Perfect. Okay. So my name is Corey Oses, and I'm picking up for the last leg of the sessions this morning. We're going to talk about the AFLOW machine learning applications. Okay, so some motivation. So we went through this morning a few ways of how we can grab pre-calculated data from AFLOW. So we learned about tools like the REST API and AFLUX. These APIs provide, as I said, pre-calculated data. They come from density functional theory calculations. And these calculations, they require particular environments to run in. They require a lot of resources, big clusters, a lot of memory. And so they're pre-computed. The calculations can take a long time. They can take days to months, depending on the material, as well as the properties. And so the goal is, we have a lot of pre-calculated data. Is there a way that we can leverage this pre-calculated data to make predictions about data that we haven't calculated yet? And so we're interested in building these sort of models based on some of the algorithms that you talked this week. I'm going to present in depth one of the models that we've worked on, but there'll be three in general that I'll be presenting today. So the first one is called property labeled materials fragments. And what we did is we took AFLOW data for about 30,000 materials, and we trained a gradient boosting decision tree machine learning model. Okay, so this is an approach like random forest, decision trees, just an algorithm for developing the model. We were interested in not only incorporating details about the stoichiometry or the properties of the atoms, but also the structure. And so the structure of the crystal. And in order to do so, we need to have an understanding of connectivity in the material, which is in general not a trivial thing. Hold on, I just want to pull up the chat to make sure that there aren't any questions. Okay, I got the chat here. So connectivity is not a trivial thing. And especially in the material. So, I skipped ahead, sorry. Okay, so in order to determine connectivity within a material, we use what are called Voronoi Tessellation. So just a quick overview of what Voronoi Tessellation is. You have these two atoms here. You bisect the distance between them, you cut it in half, and you create a surface here. We mentioned that this is in 3 dimensions. You do that for all of the atoms in the crystal, okay? And so you can see that these two atoms share what we're going to call a Voronoi face here. So connectivity, we've established, is a function of both distance. So so two atoms have to be nearby in order to be connected, but they also need to share what's called this Voronoi face here. So you can imagine if in this case, if these two atoms bunch very close to each other, the atom here and then the one that's going to be corresponding over here, those two may not share a face, and so they're not going to be connected. So geometry is important too. Okay, so with these connections, we can build a graph, a representation of the crystal. So we have the nodes that represent the atoms and the edges that represent connections. And we can build clusters of these nodes in a graph. We call them fragments. So we have a path fragment here, which is kind of a line of connected atoms. We have a circular fragment, which you can see looks like a local atomic environment. And we're going to decorate the properties of the atoms on top of these nodes. And so we're going to use properties like the number of valence electrons, the ionization potential, the electron affinity, the covalent radii, etc. So what are we doing really? You can imagine that for these 3 atoms here, the covalent radius is going to be different for atom 1, different for atom 2, different for atom 3. What we might do is we might look at the average of the covalent radius. Okay, so that's going to that number, that average for that fragment in the crystal is going to be one entry in a giant vector of numbers. Okay, so we might do the average, the standard deviation, the sum, the difference, etc. And all of these numbers build a giant vector that's going to serve as a fingerprint for each individual material, okay? And so that giant vector is how we're going to feed the machine learning algorithm with the information of the crystal, okay? So that's called a property labeled materials fragment. It's a little cartoony, but that's more or less what we're doing with the information here. So using data from AFLOW, we used electronic information. So whether the material was predicted as a metal or an insulator, that's the material, the metal insulator classification, as well as if it's an insulator, we also calculate the band gap. So using those two pieces of information from calculations that come from DFT calculations, they're calculated with the generalized gradient approximation with a plus U Hubbard term to correct for the band gap, because density functional theory tends to underestimate the band gap. And we use that data to train a model for, in this case, we're showing a model for the band gap here. You can see the calculated results. So this is the DFT band gaps, and we compare that to the predicted ones. And we have the results here. And so you can see that we're generally accurate to within 0.5 or depending on your statistic here, about 0.3 EV. Although there are a lot of materials there, and a lot of them are even more accurate than that. So we have a R-squared coefficient of 0.9. So statistics are very nice. Using the same framework, we've built a number of different models, okay? So for a given crystal system, we could classify the material as a metal and insulator. If it's an insulator, we'll pass that material into another model, a regression model, which is going to predict the value of the band gap. And then on the other side here, we have a number of regression models for thermomechanical properties. This includes things like the bulk and shear modulus, the Debye temperature, the heat capacity, those sort of properties. And so all of those are different regression models. And so using the same framework that I've discussed earlier, we built a number of different models. Cormac alluded to this earlier, but we did our training for electronic properties on about 23,000 compounds and about 3,000 compounds for the thermomechanical properties. The difference being because thermomechanical properties are a lot more difficult to calculate. If you consider an electronic calculation for the property of a band gap, if you consider that one calculation, thermomechanical properties require something of the order of like 20 different calculations. So it's a lot more expensive. And that makes the model, the machine learning model, that much more useful, because we'll get the predictions that much more faster than over DFT. So the model, there's a number of ways we can validate the model. One way that we can validate the model is to check the trends among different properties, okay? So we're able to get what's called partial dependence plots on the properties. So the first one here, we looked at what the dependence is for the bulk modulus as we scale the volume, okay, as a function of volume. And why is this important? Because you can expect that for materials, if the crystal volume is a lot smaller, that suggests that the bonds are stronger, and that's going to increase the bulk modulus. And so you can see that without having put that information explicitly into the model, we get that trend from the model. Okay, so that information is that physics is recovered in the model. Okay, we have another partial dependence plot. This is a two-dimensional one on the Debye temperature. And this is over the lattice constants B and C. And what it's telling us here is that as we make the crystal more anisotropic, the Debye temperature is going to increase. And this is certainly something that we expect from the physics of the situation. We know that we can enhance the thermal properties of a material by creating layers or structure in the material. So again, this is a nice validation that the model's learning some of the physics without explicitly putting it into it, just based on the data. We've also done a number of predictions. We've done validation based on the predictions versus the DFT versus experiment, and we have very good agreement among the three of them. So you can see that the R-squared values are very high for the bulk and shear modulus here. Just showing a sample of the data here. Okay, so we're going to navigate to aflow.org/AFLOW-ML. You don't have to do it yet. You can just follow on the slides with me, but you'll need to navigate there for the exercises. Okay, so if you go to aflow.org/AFLOW-ML, you'll see that we have a nice portal for you to interact with our models. We have three of them here. We have the PLMF model. We have what's called a molar fragment descriptor, and the AFLOW superconducting model. which was something that we worked on in collaboration with Professor Takeuchi and Dr. Stanov, who will be talking later. And so there's 3 models that you can interact with, and you select the model. So by default, it's the PLMF model. You input the structure. Okay, the structure has a particular format. So we looked at postcard VAS4 formats earlier. I'm going to talk about VAS5 format because we need to incorporate the individual components, the atoms that are involved in the structure. We also have a quantum espresso input here. So just a few different ways you can input the structure, and then you hit run prediction, and a number of seconds later you'll get a full suite of predictions here. So you see for this material is predicted to be insulating. We get a band gap, we get the bulk and shear moduli, the heat capacity, the body temperature, and thermal expansion. Okay. So what is this format for VAS4 versus 5? So this VAS4 format, this is what we looked at earlier. These are the types of structure of the structure of the format for the geometry file. The only difference is that we add 1 line. Okay, so between the lattice vectors here and the number of each type, we're going to add a line that says what each component is in the order that it's written in. And for AFLOW, it's in alphabetic order. So you can see here that we just have an additional line. Okay, so we're going to go through the exercises now. So I'll give you we can take about 5 to 10 minutes on the exercises. So I'll go through the exercises just real quickly, and then we'll take some time to go through them individually. So first, you're going to create the ALCUMN Hoister structure from the AFLOW Crystal database portal. And so the ALCUMN structure is actually the default. So you just have to find the Hoister structure in that portal and then convert it from VAS4 to VAS5. You're going to copy that structure into the AFLOW-ML application and run the PLMF model. And then, just look at the properties. Is it a metal or insulator? What are the values of the bulk and shear moduli? Given the same structure, you're then going to click on the MFD model and see what properties it gives you. And then finally, if you have time, try to play with the ASC model, the model for superconductivity. This is going to take a chemical formula. It doesn't require information about the structure. And so there's a default there if you just want to play with the default. But if you know some superconductors, you can go ahead and enter the value in and see what critical temperature it's going to give you for that composition. So I'll go ahead and give you we'll give about 5 to 7 minutes for these exercises, and then we'll come back and run through them together. All right. Feel free to post questions. I'm watching the chat. All right, I'll give you another minute to wrap up, and then we can go through the exercises together. All right, let's go through the exercises. So I'm going to stop share. Well, I'm going to share my screen, but I'm going to stop sharing this presentation. Let me share my desktop. Okay. All right, so 1 second. Let me get all this stuff out of the way. Okay, so can everyone see my desktop here? Yep, okay, great. So, all right, so the first exercise had us go to the Crystal database. So I'll show you how to navigate that really quickly if you need a reminder. Crystal prototypes. And then I'm going to type Hoister. Here's the structure. Okay, and you can see the default is actually the material I requested, the ALCUMN. So you'll see that loads up there. So if you wanted to change the species, you have the opportunity here, but all we need to do is hit VASP output, okay? And so this is a VASP4 format. We just need to change it to VASP5. So ALCU, we don't need to put CU twice, just as the unique species, MN, okay? So we're gonna open up a new tab, go to aflow.org well, I'll navigate from aflow.org so you can see how to get there. You come down, you come to the A4ml page. And I'm going to copy this content here. I'm going to paste it right inside of this portal here. I have the PLMF model selected, and I'll hit run prediction. You see that we got a card up that it's running, and we get some predictions. You can see that it's predicted to be metal. We get some bulk and shear moduli predictions here. Okay, and we have the whole suite of predictions here. Okay. We also have, I didn't mention this earlier, but we also have calculation details about how it was calculated, so you can get, if you're interested in knowing what the model was built off of, it's built off of assuming, particular parameters for DFT. We're not going to go over these details, but these might be of interest if you're running, if you're interested in predictions for particular, at particular parameters of DFT. Okay. All right, so you can click, next question was to click the MFD model, and for the same, so it looked like it cleared, so we're gonna copy the same structure, hit paste, and run prediction. This one's pretty fast. So you can see that we get some vibrational properties for this. We also get a measure of the heat capacity, okay, and some similar properties about how it was calculated, with what parameters it was calculated from DFT. The last model here takes a little bit, but you can see that you just need the composition here. So I'm just going to run it for the default. It does take a little bit of time because it's got to do some heavy analysis. But essentially, you're going to get a prediction on the critical temperature. We have two models that were built on different thresholds. And so you might want to look at the two different predictions for the critical temperature. But yeah, it does take some time. I think it takes about 15 to 20 seconds. It does take a while. Fortunately, I'll show you, yeah, so you get some predictions here for this one. So this was done at a threshold, assuming a separation threshold of the critical temperatures to be 5K and another one to be 10K. The details are included in the paper here. If anyone has questions about where that comes from, I can talk about it a little bit afterwards, but that's not really of our concern right now. I just want to show off the models. Where's the chat? The chat
Darlington will do a
disappeared.
whole lecture on that from based on.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So happy to answer that later though. All right. So I'm gonna run a quick poll just to see if everybody's how everybody's feeling about it. Relaunching the poll. Continue. I think I did that correctly, right? Yeah. Okay. So just letting me know if you guys are following things. Okay. Yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know if I can answer them, you know, post them here, and I'll be able to answer them for everybody. AFLOW in general can predict compute material compositions for bulk. Yes, that's correct. That we've done these calculations for periodic systems in all 3 dimensions, and so we're assuming bulk type material. That's right. For all 3 of these models too. No problem. Okay, so let's get back to the presentation. I'm actually going to, before I do that, I'm going to share with you, I'll put the link for the Colab here because you're going to need that for the next part. Nope, it was not sent to the right place. Okay. All right, so let me stop sharing and I'll share my presentation again. 1 second. Share. This one, share. Okay, and I'm gonna in the current slide. Okay, so can everyone see my screen? All right, so how are we doing on time? We're okay, we're doing good on time. Okay, so we're gonna go to about 12:15, so no worries. So, okay, all right, so this is one way that you can interact with the machine learning application. There's actually a faster way, a way that you can do it programmatically. And in fact, underneath the web, the machinery is using this API. So I'm gonna introduce the AFLOW-ML API. You can actually query the API directly using code, and I'm going to show you all of that. So just follow along with me on the slides. All of the information and a lot of the questions you're going to have, they're going to be answered. All of the links you need, they're going to be answered on the Jupyter Notebook. So don't worry about that. Let me make sure I have the chat open. 1 second. Chat. Okay. Okay. So we have an API that allows for it's an interface for you to interact with programmatically. It's a very simple interface, just like the web. The goal is that it obfuscates knowledge about the machine learning libraries, about the code. It's really just an interface for you to submit a structure or a composition and get back a prediction. Okay, simple as it could possibly be. And it offers a nice location for us to update both as we develop new models and as our database grows and we can retrain our models. So it requires a bit of a workflow. So here's how it works. Programmatically, here's what you're going to be doing. You're going to take your structure and you're going to submit it to the AFLOW-ML prediction endpoint, okay? So you're going to post your structure to the endpoint. Don't worry, this is all scripted. I just want you to get a feel for it from a higher level. So you're going to post your structure to this endpoint here. And the API is going to respond back with an ID, a task object. Okay, part of the task object contains an ID. You're going to take this ID. Again, this is all scripted. You're going to take this ID and you're going to post it again to the results endpoint. Okay, so the first one was the prediction endpoint. This is the prediction results endpoint. And that's going to respond back with a response object. Okay, and part of this response object is going to have it's going to have a status. Okay, so the status is going to be pending until the calculation is performed, okay, because these are not pre-calculated. So you can imagine if there's 100, 150 of us submitting it, the server in the background is going to prioritize, you know, first come, first serve, going to calculate it down the list, and then after a few seconds, it's going to give you back a success, and then you can retrieve the predictions back, okay? So this way, you can have any number of users submitting results, and basically the server will prioritize first come first serve. It's very fast though. Don't worry about depending too much. And even so, the script will take care of the pending versus success for you. So you can actually download, if you want to download the client on your machine instead of having it in the Jupyter Notebook as I have, you can actually navigate to this web page, which is available through this. It's available through this paper here, but the link is also in the Jupyter Notebook, so you can click on the link and it'll show you how to download on your computer. All right, so how do we actually do these steps that I was just talking about? You're going to be using, there's a number of ways to interact with this. If you're working from the terminal, I recommend curl, this curl command, so curl. So the syntax is curl, the endpoint. There's a flag here to encode the data from the postcard, and then you specify the file, and then the file name is postcard. Okay, so you can imagine that if you're in the terminal and you're in a particular directory that contains a file called postcard, your vast postcard 5 file, then you run this command and it will submit that structure to the API. It's going to immediately return back with this task object, which contains the ID. Okay. You take this ID, you do another curl response to this endpoint instead, the prediction results endpoint, where the line is long here, but you attach the ID to the end of it. You just put a slash and then the ID at the end, and it'll return back a response object, which will contain, if the status is successful, it'll also contain all the predictions. Okay, so this is what the results object looks like. You'll see here the status is successful. So that means that the object is going to contain all of the predictions for that model. Okay. So you see here we have bulk modulus, shear modulus, the buy, heat capacity, everything I talked about previously based on the model. This is the script that this is one of the scripts you're going to see in the Jupyter Notebook. So I'm going to just walk you through it very quickly here on the slide. This is a Python script. So one of the things to notice is that there's the sleep library. The sleep library is important because if you query the response object and it's still pending, that means your job hasn't been calculated yet, you're going to want the code to sleep for a number of seconds, to just stop and wait. Okay, so it'll wait about 10 seconds and then it'll query again, what is the status of my job? And if it's successful, then it'll return. Okay. We've parsed out the AFLOW-ML server, the endpoint that you want. So here's the server, here's the API bit, and the model. Okay, so you have the model here. So you might change this to MFD later. You're gonna read the structure, the file you have written. So this file is, in this example, it's called postcard. So you're gonna read it and then encode it, just like we were doing with the curl command. And then the rest of it is just to query the task object and return back the ID. Okay. There's another piece to this script. So this is going to run continuously until you get a successful status. So you see while incomplete. Okay. And so it's going to run. It's going to query the response. And if the status is pending, started, failure means it failed, but that we don't have to worry about that. That's not going to happen. You might see pending or success or started, in which case it's going to sleep, and then it'll sleep and then it'll do it again. And if it gets success, then it'll print out the results. Okay. All right. So let's go to the notebook, the Colab. So I'll stop sharing here, and then I'll share my desktop. And I'll pull up the chat so that I can get questions. All right, let me grab the. All right, so you should see this page come up. Let me make it bigger. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we have some introduction. I've already gone through a lot of this, but if you're interested in more details than I've spoken about, you have the information here. Here's what the task object looks like. Here's what the status object looks like. And here's some information on some of the models. Okay, and so what you can expect for it to return. Okay, so now let's go ahead and I'm going to do an exercise for you, and then I'll have you run through a few exercises a little later. Okay, so what we have here, here's an example CURL command to run. So what we wanted to do is this is going to grab a test postcard for you, and it's going to download it to your current session here in Colab, and then it's going to print out what that file has. So go ahead and run that. And you see that you get this structure here, okay? And it's already in VASP format 5, so we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so now that we've downloaded the file, we're going to submit it to the API endpoint for the prediction, okay? And you see here that I've written PLMF is part of this link of this endpoint here, so that's telling which model I want to submit it to. We have to encode it and then the name of the file. So let's go ahead and do that. And what it's going to respond with is a task ID, task object, and we're going to grab the ID. Okay, so you see the ID is here. So we're going to copy that and insert it into the next piece of code here. Okay, so now we're going to query this response. And you can see, because I waited a significant amount of time, the response immediately came back successful with all the predictions. Okay, very simple. Here we have the Python code I talked about earlier. Okay, well, all I've done is change from postcard to test postcard, because that's the name of our new postcard file. Okay, so we're just gonna run this script. And we get back a response. Okay, we get back this URL. So we're gonna copy that URL and we're gonna put it in the next code. Okay, so this is the URL that we want to query now. So it's going to query the response and it's going to see, is it pending, started, failed, success? Okay, so we're going to hit enter. And the prediction was calculated. If you see pending, if the status comes back as pending or started, just rerun the cell and you'll see that it'll come back. Okay. Now, we've combined this. Any questions? No. We've combined this into one big Python script. So I have that here, and we have the while loop, so you don't have to worry about the pending or the started. And this Python script is just it's going to do the whole thing for you. Okay, so for given a particular postcard here, input file here, it's going to run the whole series of steps and just return back the response object. Okay, so just take a notice here that if the status is successful, I'm printing out the whole response here. Okay, remember that the response comes back as a JSON, which intuitively in Python is a dictionary. So if we want to query one of these in particular, we have to query, a particular property. Okay, so we might do description or whatever, and that's going to print back that's going to print back just that particular entry in the dictionary. Okay. All right. So, all right. So now we have some exercises. And this one will take 5 minutes to do. It's going to be very simple, maybe even 2 minutes, because it's very fast. Convert this file to a VASP format 5, VASP 5 format, and then run the cell. And you'll see that there's a command here at the top. This is actually going to write out the file mgo rocksalt.postcard. So instead of test.postcard, you have mgo rocksalt postcard. And then you're going to want to copy the script from above. I recommend taking this one, copy it into this cell, change it so that it refers to this structure, and then get the materials for the file. Oh, sorry, get the predictions for the file. Then you're going to want to modify. You're going to copy again that script into the second box, and you're going to want to modify it slightly so it only prints out the prediction for the bulk modules. I just showed you how to do that. And then take the Python code again and change it for the same structure, but run it for the MFD model instead. Okay, so we'll take 4 minutes to do that. We'll come back at 12:15, and then we'll continue. All right, looks like we have a question. Is the atomic structure the only input for the ML model? Yes, the atomic structure, which includes, by virtue of the fact that we're using the VAS5 format, the chemistry. So it includes the atom species. Additional feature, there's no additional features that you need to input. So everything else is calculated on the fly. So there's you're gonna, all of the properties from our database are queried automatically under the hood. Okay. Yes, there's gonna be, well, the next break is lunch. So the after I go through the exercises here, I'll just talk for another few minutes, and then I think we just have a wrapping up conclusion, and then there's lunch. Okay. No problem. Okay. Looks like someone's getting a syntax error for the results URL. In my host right now, it would be nice to maybe do this in a breakout room. So give it a minute. We're gonna reconvene in a minute, and then I'll show you. Maybe you might be able to fix the problem when I run through the exercises. If not, we can do a breakout room as we break for lunch. All right, let's run through this. I hope it was pretty simple for everybody. But to convert this to a VASP 5 format, you just have to add MGNO here, okay? And then run the cell. So you'll see that you get the echo response that it wrote out the file. I'm going to copy this script like this, okay? And I'm going to copy it just for the sake of time. I'm going to copy it 3 times. Okay, for the first one, all we have to do is change test postcard to the new file that we have. So that's this. So we'll put that in there and we'll hit submit. Okay. And we get back our prediction. Okay. So that's pretty simple. The next one asked us just to modify the code so we get the bulk modulus. So the bulk modulus has this name here, ML AE bulk modulus VRH. Okay. So instead of printing out the full set of results, I'm just going to get back that particular object of the dictionary. I'll hit run. And you see that we get our prediction here. And then we can, instead of the PLMF model, we're going to do the MFD model, which is here. Okay. And then we hit run. And we get back a quick result. Okay, so those are the exercises that I wanted you to run through. I have some additional content if you're interested, if you want to interact with the Python client on your actual machine. I recommend that you go through these next cells. So there's some information here. Here's the link I promised. So if you want to actually download it from your machine, you click on this link and you can actually just follow the instructions as I've written them here in the cell. Okay. And there's no exercises. You just have to run the cells to see what happens. But it'll actually give you a way to interact with it inside of Python. And then there's also, if you want to run it from the terminal, there's a binary that gets downloaded that's called AFLOW-ML. And there's some nice ways to interact with it from the terminal. Okay, so you can save. You can. We give you a bunch of different options for how to interact with it and how to get your results very quickly. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna relaunch the poll just to see if how you guys are doing. See if there's any lingering questions. If to the person to Keitharin, if you still have your question, feel free to reach out to me at lunch. But otherwise, that wraps up my section. And I thank you for your time.